Glad to have you with us. It's Bills by the Numbers, where we let the stats tell you where the Bills are at. We're presented by FanDuel. Download the app and make every moment more. Across the board, the Bills roster is more talented and deeper than the 13-3 division title team of a year ago. So why is no one talking about it? Steve and I discuss. We also have Steve try to guess the new faces on the Bills roster in the numbers game, and ESPN analytics writer Seth Walder ranks the Bills core with others across the league. Let's gun for the top spot! Roster review time here on Bills by the Numbers. Bills Hall of Famer Steve Tasker and Bills insider Chris Brown with you. And first on the docket is, with much of the roster improved from last year's iteration, we need a hot take on which position group, Steve, you think was upgraded the most this offseason.
I would say, I might say wide receiver.
Okay. That's a hot take.
They got three guys that are going to play: Davis, Diggs, and Shakir. Those are the only three guys left
from last year's team.
And yes. I think the guys that they brought in are talented, and they also have some size. And they brought in a ton of – John Brown was back in the fold last year. Cole Beasley was back in the fold last year.
They got called back into the fold.
I think – and for me, they were insurance policies, because I think they did have faith in Diggs. They have faith in Davis and all of that stuff, McKenzie. But I think the fact that they revamped those guys, they got younger, they got bigger, and they got more athletic. Hardy, Sherfield are the two most shining examples. And then, of course, the kid that came in that they drafted. So all those guys, shorter. And they are big. And they're more athletic. Hardy's very athletic. He's not big. He's smaller than McKenzie was, but I think he's even more dynamic. Sherfield, I'm very intrigued by. But I think from where they were last year, they were second in the league in drops, and the turnovers were a problem last year. With these guys pushing those top guys, I'm not saying I expect three different starters in there or two different starters with Diggs and two other guys, but I do think there's going to be some rotation there that's going to help.
It's guard for me. The personnel department made a conscious decision on what ailed them up front last season. It was pocket integrity and running the ball between the tackles when they wanted to run the ball. So they got bigger and more physical at the guard spots, adding three viable options who could land or compete for the two starting guard spots. If they improve those two areas up front, the offense will keep defenses off balance even more, I believe, and will give Ken Dorsey more play-calling options. Which position group, Steve, despite perceived improvements, still has to prove it to you in the regular season to feel better about it?
Probably the defensive line.
Okay.
I want to see,
is that because after Vaughn got hurt,
right,
the pass rush kind of
I mean, they got to do it with and without him. They're going to have to do that this year, probably at the beginning of the year. He's probably going to probably ease his way back into it. Plus, they need to be consistent. And for this pass rush to be even noticeable, they got to be a force. They were okay last year. They showed up at some times and had some pretty good production early in the season. But if you want to be better than that, it's almost the point where you got to be dominant. And with Leonard Floyd in there, with Rousseau and his, about to spread his wings, and now Von Miller back if he's 100% healthy, along with take your pick of the guys who are left, Shaq, AJ, all those guys. They have to be almost a force to really prove it to anybody they're going to be anything different than what they have been in the past.
I'm going to go to your position from your first answer. For me, the prove-it position is receiver, not because I don't believe in them, but to your point, there's only three incumbents from last year in Diggs, Davis, and Shakir.
Right.
So while I believe Deontay Hardy is talented and Trent Sherfield is talented, among the others that are at that group, they all have to get on the same page with Josh, number one, as well as, oh, by the way, the tight end who was the first-round draft pick. So I wonder how long that takes, before it's humming the way they want it to? Like, does it look good right out of the gate week 1? Does it take 3 or 4 games, until you get to week 5? Like, you can lean on Davis, Diggs, and Shakir, but let's get some role players to give us a little bit more, and get them up to speed. How long does that take is the thing that I'm maybe most curious about.
Right.
So we believe they're better on the offensive line and defensive lines. At what positions do we feel they are deeper, Steve? And it could be specific positions on the O or D line, but are there other positions where we feel they are deeper?
Yeah, a couple, more than one. Secondary is deeper than it was last year, and more proven, I would say, as well. Taylor Rapp is a difference maker. He's a guy that can step in, play, and have less drop off than there was a year ago. The corners with Benford,
Benford
Kyer,
staying there for now.
Yeah, Kyer, Benford, Dane Jackson, Tre'Davious, and of course Taryn.
Cam Dantzler
just got added. They've got some depth over there on the secondary. The secondary has been, as we know, stellar when it's been healthy over the last 4 or 5 years, and I think they got better this offseason, and they're very deep over there. And we've toyed with the idea of maybe being so rich at some of these positions, there may be some guys that you could trade away. Now that we're talking about it, the secondary may be one of those spots as well.
I agree with the positions you pointed out. I'm going to say running back, too. I think they're deeper there. They have these 2 big backs in Damian Harris and Latavius Murray. I don't know if Latavius Murray's a lock to make the 53-man roster. I think they want him here, but it wouldn't surprise me if he ends up on the practice squad, much like veteran Duke Johnson was last year, as an insurance policy. To be that physical runner. Like, let's say Damian Harris, God forbid, gets hurt. He's going to miss 3 or 4 games. I could see Latavius Murray being the plug-and-play option there for your physical back role. And then I think you can point to the edge, Steve. When you sign Leonard Floyd in June, you're deeper and more talented.
Oh, yeah.
So you're adding him to a stable of players. Even defensive tackle, Poona Ford, come on.
Yeah.
They're loaded.
They got some guys. They got some girth. They got some size. They got some athletes up front. And they got some guys that are playmakers as well. And I think that's the one word that we have not been able to use about this defense for the last couple of years. They just don't make splash plays very much.
Yeah.
The only one you can point to really is the Taron Johnson play 2 years ago in 2020 in the COVID year when he, the 101-yard interception return against the Baltimore Ravens to put that game away in the playoffs. Is a historic play. It's unbelievable.
Right.
But that's a short list.
Yeah. I mean, Kyer had the interception in the Miami game, the Miami wildcard game. That turned the tide there because things were not looking good for a while, and he makes that pick deep in Dolphins territory. The Bills go in and score and kind of take the game from there. So there are, but you're right. It's a short list for sure. Is there a position that gives you pause, a spot on this team where you're not even expecting them to be better necessarily? You're just hoping for steady, consistent play there.
Yeah, it's got to be middle linebacker. I mean, Tremaine Edmonds is gone. They've got 4 or 5 guys that are on the list to, be that guy. And of course it starts with Terrell Dodson, Balin Spector, Terrell Bernard. But there's also Dorian Williams. And a guy that I'm really intrigued by is Traven Howard. We've been watching him.
Athletic player.
He's an athletic player. In fact, he's as good an athlete as anybody in that group. Don't know what it is between his ears or where it's at there, or what he's got in between, in his chest. I don't know what kind of heart he has, but athletically he's there. And when they put pads on and all this stuff starts to take shape, you can bet athletes are going to make a difference. So we'll see. Although I've told you I thought Balin Spector's got a shot at that, and I think people kind of overlook him. He was a really athletic kid coming out of college last year. That's why he was on the 53. He could cover kicks. He could run and do a lot of things.
Right.
It'll be interesting to see if his athleticism transfers over into the middle linebacker spot. But they've got some guys there. But, man, and I get it. I mean, nobody was going to step out and beat Tremaine Edmonds out for the middle linebacker spot here in Buffalo, even if they were a really good player. So we'll find out if there was a really good player waiting in the wings, and maybe it was part of the reason they did not match Tremaine because they felt like, we got a guy. But I think we would have heard that if we had.
Yeah.
If that had been the case.
I'm with you on this. Middle linebacker is the obvious choice here. And it's not because there isn't any faith in the talent that exists at the position. They have options. I just think the fact that it's largely unproven talent is what gives you pause and may temper your expectations. You're just hoping for a guy that can talk to everybody on the defense, get everybody in the right call, and then make some plays as well. They don't have to be all pro. They don't have to be a Pro Bowler. This defense is loaded. Just be a steady, consistent player. Get your feet under you as you acclimate to what is the ultimate responsibility position on the defensive side of the ball. And hopefully there's a guy that rises to the top through training camp and seizes the position, says, I'm your guy, and then has, a relatively steady and consistent season first year as a starter. Because you're talking about a first-year starter no matter who it is, unless for some reason they break the emergency glass and it's A.J. Klein.
Having somebody come in and explode onto the NFL scene as a top-flight elite NFL linebacker, it doesn't seem like it's coming from this group. But what you can hope for is a guy who's not only steady, but every so often, and as the season goes on, better, and all of a sudden he starts to flash, and then he starts to flash more consistently, and all of a sudden by the end of the year, maybe he does turn into a guy like, all right, going forward, this is our guy, and everybody feels good about it.
What perceived upgrades to this roster, Steve, do you believe could most impact how the team performs, whether it's schematically or identity-wise?
We've had these conversations before. I think it all starts up front, and if you're going to go with which one identity-wise, it's a throwing league, it's a passing league, and everybody says, yeah, we'd love to have a run game. Okay, great, but the Bills' offensive line upgrades are going to make a big difference, I think, in both sides of the equation offensively, throwing the ball and running the ball. Running the ball, you just want to have guys up there, and it's really difficult to do. You want to have a running game that when everybody knows you're going to run it, you don't care. Let's go. That may be where they're at finally after being kind of they were good running. They were 7th in the league in rushing. They were top 10. They didn't stink. And the perception is because the least productive part of the Bills' offense was their running game, so that they must stink at that. Let's change everything around. Well, they don't have to. They were 7th in the league in rushing. They were fine in rushing, but the rest of their offense is so elite. If you're going to fix it, there's where you start. Their offense doesn't need to change too much of anything. But like I said, when they want to run the football, Josh doesn't have to be a part of that, and they don't care. Let's just hand it off to one of these guys and behind these guards, and let's go.
I see your point there. I think Dalton Kincaid is a natural choice here too, given the proper amount of playing time and opportunity. We've talked about it on our daily show, One Bills Live, all through the spring here since he was the first-round draft choice. We could see 12 personnel usage go up to somewhere near 20% if he's on the fast track, and some indications that we've seen out in the spring practices would say he's on a fast track as far as rookies go around here. And Leonard Floyd makes it a three-headed monster at defensive end with Von Miller and Greg Rousseau. I think it affords them the opportunity to use a NASCAR package in obvious passing situations where you can put 3 speed rushers on the field. You kick Rousseau inside because he's rushed from there before in his career, and put his length next to Ed Oliver with Floyd and Miller on the outside. Good freaking luck with that.
And it also means a little something different for quarterbacks like Tua in the division, maybe Mac Jones as well, because Mac Jones doesn't run really well. You put a guy with Rousseau's length right in front of him instead of on the edge, and all of a sudden he's trying to throw around a tree. It's just one more problem, along with a guy like Ed Oliver, who is a disruptor. Yeah, you're right. It's very intriguing, and because at some point in these games, you don't want to do that on 3rd and 2, but at some point in these games, somebody's going to be 3rd and 9+.
I like it on 3rd and 11.
And man, oh man, it's a problem.
I just get goosebumps talking about those 4 names lined up next to each other in a pass rush package. Yeah. If I like it that much, they're talking about some iteration of that upstairs in the coaches' offices. Finally, why do we think, Steve, no one nationally is talking about how much Buffalo has improved their roster this offseason? We've seen a lot of the national headlines this offseason. None of them have included the Bills. I'm sure Sean McDermott loves it. He loves lying in the weeds and being under the radar because it's an easier place to jump off from as a springboard to start your season rather than the Super Bowl expectations that were lumped onto the Bills after the Von Miller acquisition. But I think we agree on this. The Bills roster this year is better than it was last year.
Yeah, there's a couple reasons for it. First of all, there's a lot of really juicy headlines everywhere else in the National Football League. Aaron Rodgers being off the top of your head.
Odell Beckham to the Ravens.
Beckham Jr., Derek Carr taking off. All this stuff, Sean Payton going to Denver and straightening that offense out. A lot of stuff going on.
Vic Fangio to the Dolphins.
That's right. So there's a lot of juicy stuff going on around the league. Plus, the last time people saw the Bills was a flop against Cincinnati in the playoffs here. And I think the recency bias of that, we were, I don't know whether beneficiaries or whatever you want to call it last year when, that last 13-second game after the week before the 13-second. Don't forget, it was only a division round they got put out in that 13-second. They still had to go, and Cincinnati would have been here for the championship game. But the week before that 13-second game, when the Bills looked so unbelievable, was an absolute perfect game from Josh Allen, the offense, where they just hung the Patriots out to dry. So they were humming. Recency bias then, you project that onto what happened at the end of this last season when they laid a stinker against Cincinnati. And it's no wonder why people are going, maybe they're not all of that, right? And plus all the other things that are going on around the league. So certainly the Bills fans and the coaching staff, nobody's really bellyaching about being off the radar a little bit this offseason. But I'm with you, Brownie. We're hearing around Buffalo, and I got people coming up to me, what do you think? I'm telling them, this team, I use the same word all the time, this team is a wrecking crew. They are going to be so hard to beat when they line up this season.
Yeah. And, whether it's the people that they brought back, the people that are healthy, and then the good quality player adds. There are very few additions to this offseason roster that are throwaway additions, if you know what I'm saying. Like, did they sign some guys to 1-year minimum veteran contracts? Yes. But some of those guys are proven starters in this league. David Edwards is a 3-year starter for a Super Bowl team in L.A.
Right.
That's like one of their lesser named guys.
So Leonard Floyd.
Proven starter.
Taylor Rapp started on that team.
Exactly. Right. So, quality player ads may not be splashy, may not be sexy, but they unquestionably made this team better overall in terms of talent and in terms of depth. We specify this discussion a bit more with ESPN.com's NFL analytics writer Seth Walder, who recently put a piece together ranking the best core player groups on teams in the NFL. The Bills ranked 5th. Here is Seth. Okay, Seth, so you put together a ranking list of the best NFL team roster cores in the league on ESPN.com recently. You had the Bills 6th overall with the core listed as Allen Diggs, Von Miller, Trey White, and Milano. Can you just first explain maybe what analytic components were used in putting the list together?
Mostly vibes, I think that was the big thing. In some ways, it's funny because I think a lot of projects like this, it's like I think that my analysis is hopefully informed a lot by numbers, but then in the end of the day, there's no magic formula, and so I do have to take everything that I know quantitatively and then qualitatively make a judgment. Like in thinking about the Bills, are you asking about which players I selected to be the 5, or why they ended up being ranked where they are?
Well, probably both.
Right. Yeah.
Probably
I'm curious
both.
about both. Yeah.
It's interesting because there was you said Tre'Davious White is part of the core group, and I get why that is, and it's interesting because he was kind of off the Bills' production radar last year for most of the season, and then when he came back after the Damar Hamlin thing, he was not himself at any point during the regular season. So if you go back 2 years, absolutely, you got to stick him in there. But he's kind of off the radar for Bills fans at this point.
I think I was somewhat torn here. I think there's a few ways you could have gone. I mean, to me, Jordan Poyer was a potential consideration there instead.
Right.
Age was like kind of like a light factor, I was thinking here. So Poyer's obviously older. I mean, I do feel like the Bills' safeties are so crucial to that defense, or at least they were 2 years ago. And I do think that they do have a lot of the promise, or the promise of that defense is defined by their safeties. But at the same time, like White, as you mentioned, has shown an ability to be basically an elite corner. And I do tend to think that corners who are very variant from year to year, once you show that ability to be an elite corner, you have that ability again. We've seen guys like Xavier Rhodes be really good, then be really bad, and then be really good again. And I think that having that potential from a guy like White, especially he was also coming off the injury last season, to me, it's like a little more important position. That also really was a factor in why I went that way. But I understand the question.
Sure.
Okay, so I saw you factored average age of the core players into this as well. Curious, where is the tipping point where average age became a negative in terms of value on this chart?
We actually I didn't factor an average age in terms of the ranking. It was just something we included as in there.
Okay.
So I think the idea being that I'm looking at basically 2023, how strong are your 5 best players, however, your 5 core players, and then how old those players are obviously determines maybe the length of time they might be on your team, right? You can have a good core but an old core, and those aren't necessarily mutually exclusive. So no, so age wasn't a factor in determining the ranking in and of itself.
One of the things about it is, at the first glance, I thought, wow, the core rankings kind of mirror the QB rankings, right? I mean, you do get some change, but the quarterbacks do carry some weight in these cores. Josh Allen, Pat Mahomes, you got Burrow. Tua's in the top 5. Dak is in the top 5. Herbert, and now Aaron Rodgers is at number 8. It kind of does, but not exactly. And while those quarterbacks kind of elevate the guys around him, the fact that you threw in defensive players and that it didn't really follow the quarterback rankings it made it more interesting for me.
To me, if you're asking me to rank quarterbacks that I would like to have going to the 2023 season, I would put Josh Allen at number 2. So I think that in a way, let me put it this way. I was surprised, kind of like if you had before we told me the assignment and said immediately, where do you think you're going to rank the Bills? I would probably have said 3. And I think it speaks to when I'm sort of going through the rosters and I'm thinking about the rest of this roster, and you think about Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs, and they are the highlight of this team. But then I look at the rest of this group and I compare it to these other top teams, and I'm feeling slightly underwhelmed in terms of star power, like especially on that offense, on the Bills offense. It's Allen and Diggs, a high-end quarterback, high-end receiver, is the best possible way you can start. And then after that, who really excites you? Now, I think there's an argument that the Bills roster is like better than their 5 guys because there's no stars on their offensive line, but it's not a bad offensive line. And so that helps too. But yeah, to me, the idea of having a guy like White, like you mentioned, not coming off of strong play, Miller coming off of injury, and then Matt Milano, who I'm probably, honestly, I'd really like. I've been higher on him than I think most non-Bills fans out there for a while, but he's still an off-ball linebacker, and that's just not a premium position. And we're comparing to some of these other teams that are just stacked at premium positions. It fell a little bit short.
On a broader view, Seth, I'm curious, is there a metric out there that can assess roster depth as a whole? Because I would argue that Buffalo's roster, while it may not have the high-end talent that you were looking for a core, I think the roster is more talented overall and deeper than it was last year based on the moves that Brandon Beane has made this offseason, and nobody's really talking about it. And I get it. The Aaron Rodgers thing is blocking out the sun in New York, and I understand why, because they haven't had a good quarterback in 40 years. So I get it. And there are other bigger headlines across the league in terms of offseason acquisitions, but very quietly, Brandon Beane has kind of retooled this roster into a deeper thing. That's why I'm curious, like, have you analytics guys come up with a way to assess overall roster depth?
Can't believe you do Ryan Fitzpatrick like that, man. No, I think there's no metric, but I can tease that, like what you're talking about. I mean, me and Mike Clay have teamed up to do an entire roster evaluation that'll be out later this month.
Oh, nice.
And, I don't want to spoil it, but yeah, what you just said is how I came down. And that is that I ranked the Bills higher than 5 in their overall roster, because I do agree with you. Like I said, with the offensive line, no star power, but it's not like a serious weakness to me. I think guys like Daquan Jones are really good. I think the safeties, like I mentioned, can be potentially just crucial elements for this defense if they each have one more year left in them. And so I agree that the Bills have a better roster than their top 5, right? Their top 2 is excellent. Their top 5 is good, obviously very good, but takes a little step back. We look at the whole 53, I would feel pretty good about that.
One of the things that we've noticed here, sitting here watching this AFC take shape, particularly with last year Russell Wilson coming over, now Aaron Rodgers is over. The AFC is the NFC almost looks like the relegation league.
It's JV.
I mean, so you look at who could be good in the NFC, and it's the Philadelphia Eagles. Brownie we were talking about it this morning. They faced no adversity all last season, no injuries. They got a 4th-string quarterback in the NFC Championship game. They had all this stuff that kind of fell their way, took them all the way to the Super Bowl. And as good as they were, do you think they go through a season, even playing in the NFC, do you think they skate through a season like they did last year?
I think there's definitely a chance that they do. I would definitely make them favorites. I agree with everything you said. There's a huge disparity between the two leagues. To me, I think what's interesting is a team like Dallas that I weirdly, because they're the Cowboys, I feel like is almost underrated in their Super Bowl chances, because to me, that's a really good team. And there's not really anybody else, right? So you got the Eagles. I think it's Eagles, Dallas, San Francisco, and we're still talking about a third team with a huge question mark at quarterback. So a team like Dallas, to me, is the biggest threat to Philadelphia. They're one of these teams that has, at any given point over the last 4 or 5 years, they could have broken through and made that Super Bowl run, and it didn't happen. But it easily could have. The window was there, and I think that window is still open for them. And so if they were in the AFC, I would not be feeling that good about them, but they have that kind of path. So I think they're the challenger, but agree with your point that Philadelphia, that's why, we really like their Super Bowl chances. It's because of the easy path in the NFC.
Yeah, because people like us who are not analytics experts we'll say, oh, well, everything that went right for Philadelphia, some of the law of averages is going to, bring them back to the mean a little bit more than they experienced last year. Is there anything that, and this is my last one.
That's not how that works. Tell them.
I know. Well, is there anything out there metric-wise that stands out from one year to the next that you'd say, okay, they were extraordinarily high in this metric, and it's not often that happens, A, 2 years in a row, and then B, how much might they come back to the mean? Like I'm thinking of a Minnesota Vikings, for example, Seth, that had 10 one-score wins last year. That's coming back to the mean this year, right?
Yeah, I think Minnesota in and of themselves does not think that they were like a 13-win team last year. But if you look at their offseason and what they've done, I think they're sort of like, I don't know. I mean, if they trade Danielle Hunter, it kind of feels like a rebuild almost.
Yeah.
I think with Philadelphia, I guess the bear case is that they had a good defense, and that tends to be more variant year to year, tends to regress. They got excellent play out of their corners, which I've already mentioned, can really zigzag from year to year. But it's not, they were a better offense than they were defense last year. As crazy as that sounds, I think their defense was fantastic. but so was their offense. And I just don't see why that should change dramatically this season. Minnesota, the Giants, I'm with you on step backs and win total for sure. I don't think so with Philly.
Seth, thanks so much.
Yeah, we'll look forward to that report on full roster depth when you and Mike Clay spell it out later this month. Thanks very much.
Thank you, guys.
Time to spin things over to the numbers game where Steve will be quizzed on the new faces of the roster. He's had some opportunity to look at the new people up and down the Buffalo roster. Let's see how he does here in the numbers game. Question number 1, Steve. How many total new faces are there on Buffalo's 90-man roster?
Dude.
If you had to guess a number, where would you peg it? How many new faces in total?
90. So they had 53 last year. There's one guy gone. I would say out of the 50, I would say new faces. See, 50 out of 40, 50.
Well,
47.
Well,
47.
you're a little high. There's 32.
Oh, all right.
32 new faces on the roster this year.
Oh, because of the practice squad guys and everything?
Well, on the 90-man roster that exists now,
Right.
I went back and looked at the 90-man roster at this time last year. There's a total of 32 new faces this year.
That surprises me a little bit. Go ahead.
It does? It's lower than you thought.
Yeah,
Okay.
obviously.
Which position has the most new additions? Try not to look at your roster card there to count.
I'd say wide receiver.
And you would be correct.
Yeah.
Wide receiver. 8 new players on the 90-man roster right now. As we know, only 3 holdovers from last year. Diggs, Davis, Shakir. Question number 3. Which position, Steve, had the most late additions this offseason? We heard Brandon Beane last week talk about how Brian Gain mentioned to him, hey, we've got 12 new guys on this roster since May 1st. So which position had the most late additions this offseason?
Defensive line.
You're right there. I'll give it to you. It's defensive end. It's edge rusher. Shane Ray,
Shane Ray,
Cameron Klein, and Leonard Floyd. 3 new players at that one position. All right, Steve, you got a chance to go 3 for 4 here.
Here we go. Come on, baby.
Which player? I got it. Give me your roster card. I don't trust you. Give me. He's got a cheat sheet in front of him.
Not a cheat sheet. I mean, it's a roster. Well, come on.
All right, question number 4. Which player on the Bills roster changed his number from last season?
Oh, Naheem Hines.
Boom! Right out of the gate.
The big 0.
The big. Well, I don't know if he wants to go by that moniker.
Well, that's what he changed.
But he
went
changed,
from 21, 22.
He was 20.
Yeah.
And changed to number 0. 3 out of 4 for Steve on the numbers game this week. Coming in hot. That's a good performance for you for the first time in a little while here.
Come on, man.
That was good.
Whoa. Why you got to say it like that?
You did a good job there, man.
And I had a 1 in 90 chance of getting the new faces thing right, too.
Well, I don't know about 1 in 90. You weren't going to guess 90, and you weren't going to guess 1, right?
1 in 85.
Okay. I mean, rosters typically turn over 25 to 30% from one year to the next. That's kind of right in the ballpark there. All right, good job in the numbers game, Steve. Hey, Bills fans, get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Just download the app today to play any way you want. Now through June 18th, get a no-sweat first bet up to $2,500. Plus, with live betting, you'll get updated odds on games that have already started. Best of all, you'll get paid your winnings fast. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the Buffalo Bills. Time now for our one burning question, and it deals with the bounty of players the Bills signed this offseason to 1-year contracts. Steve, which player on a 1-year contract with the Bills right now do you believe is most likely to re-sign next offseason?
I would say probably Jordan Phillips.
Jordan Phillips. Tell me why.
He likes playing here. They like him. He brings a lot of energy. I think he has found his spot in the NFL and loves it. He's tried the grass is not always greener in other places he's been. I think the Bills treat him right, the culture's right, and I think he likes playing on a winner with this defense. And I think this defense this year with Sean McDermott calling the plays is going to be a lot more fun for these guys because they'll be more aggressive, at least off the surface. So in a vacuum, I think it's probably one of those guys that this team has seen for a minute. I think they'll sign him next year.
That is an interesting choice. I'm intrigued by that. I know a lot of people forget, but that's a guy that had 9.5 sacks for this team in 2019, and he is going to be able to play more of the 3-technique position with Poona Ford here as Daquan Jones' rotational partner. So he'll be Ed Oliver's rotational partner. He'll be able to get after the passer a lot more this year. He might be able to, if he stays healthy, because his season last year was marred by injuries, as we know. That is an intriguing pick that I like a lot, but not as much as my pick, which for me is Taylor Rapp. I think this is a young player who is an heir apparent at one of the starting safety positions. We know Micah Hyde is in the last year of his deal. Poyer has another year after this season, but I think as much as I hate to say it and believe it, because it's been enormously successful, I don't know if the Poyer-Hyde combo goes beyond the 2023 season. With that in mind, Taylor Rapp is an ideal replacement candidate. So you bring him in this year, you see what he can do. Sean McDermott was speaking about him glowingly when he was asked about what Taylor Rapp has done so far here in a Bills uniform. I think he is a prime candidate to be signed, not only re-signed next year, but to a long-term contract. So that's my pick. Our closing figure this week deals with the number of rookies on Buffalo's offseason roster. As the team gets its break before training camp, there are just 13 rookies on the roster right now. Last year at this time, 18 rookies. In 2020, 13 rookies. 2019, 13 rookies, and there were 18 in 2018. Here's what's interesting, Steve. In each of the last 3 years, Buffalo has kept the identical number of rookies on their initial 53-man roster. 6 rookies made the roster last year, 6 the year before that, 6 in 2020. Exactly the same number. Do you have any theory as to why that is? It's a hard roster to make?
No, it is a hard roster to make, but I think it'll be a difficult roster this year as well. It'll probably be right around that number. Certainly the draft picks are going to try and find a way to keep them on the 53-man, find them, give them away to make it. But that's about the entire draft class, right? There's 6 guys in the draft class. So all of them have a chance. But we have also seen this team sign and start undrafted rookie free agents. So I don't think it's a set in stone number. I think they are very secure in what it looks like when you got it like last year with Benford and Kaiir Elam. I think they don't care what it looks like to people outside the organization, whether they got a guy who's sitting who they invested more into in a draft pick than they did in a rookie free agent that nobody else wanted. If the guy can play, he's going to be on the field. And I think that's so I think if there are rookies out there, which I think, I think all 6 of these rookies in this draft class have a shot at making it, but there also may be, 1 or 2 more that we don't know yet. I would not be surprised if that's the case, particularly given the wide receiver room and of course, you go with guys like Osiris Torrance and Kincaid and those guys. Those are automatics.
The last time more than 6 rookies made the Bills' 53-man roster was 2019. 7 made it. It was only 1 more.
Right.
So not an easy roster to make, especially now, if you're a rookie, to crack this roster. But if you earn it, they'll put you on. Christian Benford was a rookie last year as a 6th-round draft choice from a 1AA program, and he started week 1. That'll do it for this episode. Please subscribe on your podcast platform so you know when our next episode drops. And remember, when you need to know about the Bills, you need to check Bills by the Numbers. For Steve Tasker, I'm Chris Brown. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time, everybody.